To say that there have been major changes in this new Six Flags Entertainment Corporation post-merger would be an understatement, and we've just learned some new details about what the company could be looking like in the next couple of years, specifically with portfolio optimization.
Yeah, so it's been pretty clear from the start of this whole merger process that a big thing that they're concerned about is cutting costs, specifically operational costs. And I feel like it has been very overt that they are trying to get rid of anything and everything that is costing them more than they feel it is worth.
Absolutely. So in this case, not only are they taking a look at their entire park portfolio, which I just like to remind everyone is 42 properties. So we are not just talking about theme parks here. There's also independent water parks in the mix. So a ton of places to keep in mind. And internally, they've been conducting a portfolio review, which takes a look at one, what attractions are not critical to their long-term growth, as well as which parks are what they cite as smaller, non-core properties, aka places that they can consider dropping should the circumstances arise.
Yeah, so, you have to look at the fact that there are some small properties that they own, like Michigan's Adventure is a really good example, that, as enthusiasts, we're kind of not a great park, but it brings them in a lot of money and they don't have to do anything.
Yeah, all you gotta do is keep it going.
So you have to look for parks that do require investment, or the investment they put into it isn't really yielding a result, or no matter what they do, it's just not worth the benefits that come from it.
Yeah, so this doesn't mean that we are immediately going to see the closure of any specific properties, but I think that it means that this is in the back of their mind as what should we do? Because I think that when we all kind of figured that when this merger took place, the odds that they kept every single park is low. Right now, they're specifically targeting attractions that they don't want to keep around. So that's why we've been seeing so many lesser roller coasters close. I'm talking about Anaconda, Kings Dominion, Nighthawk at Carowinds. We just learned of 2 coasters in the Six Flags chain that we are officially saying goodbye to. That is both Kid Flash coasters at Six Flags Over Georgia and Six Flags Fiesta Texas.
After not a whole lot of time.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised that they decided to give up on those so soon.
I don't know. Maybe if I saw the numbers, I would agree, but just on the surface of it, I'm cool.
I think they're really just taking a look at every park's portfolio and saying, what are the non-essential attractions that are eating up more time and revenue than is worth it? So 2 big things that we've been seeing the immediate closure of are sky coasters and go-karts, both of which are upcharge attractions and require a lot of staff, and especially in the case of sky coasters, extensive training.
Sky coasters are really fun. Don't get me wrong. Go-karts are really fun. But something about upcharge attractions that parks of that level are kind of off-putting.
Oh, how many times do you walk by these attractions and see that no one is doing them? Go-karts especially, you need to have a decent number of people to have an actually interesting race.
Yeah.
And sky coasters are relatively expensive, and it is in your benefit to do so in a group because then it brings the cost down for everyone, and not everyone might be willing to pay that, or it might be a one and done.
But it is kind of an interesting thing to think about though, how many of all of the operational sky coasters are in the Six Flags / Cedar Fair chain?
They have them all over the world, but there's a ton
There's a lot.
in the chain.
Yeah.
And we just learned that officially the ones in the chain that are going, Cedar Point, Kings Island, Valley Fair, Six Flags Over Georgia, and supposedly Kings Dominions. Apparently that one might stick around for this season, but it won't be operating. So, I completely understand these, especially since they do take up a decent amount of land. And especially if you want to develop that space for future expansion, there are better alternatives. I'm especially looking at Cedar Point, where that was right in prime real estate where they could be putting long-term a major roller coaster.
And likewise, the go-karts that are going to be closing are also at Kings Dominion and Over Georgia. So speaking of Kings Dominion specifically, the removal of the go-karts plus the removal of the sky coaster does free up a good amount of space.
Well, it's all surrounding Grizzly. So
Correct.
I like to think, especially with go-karts in particular, that's a decent plot of land. I like to think that they are eyeing it for genuinely just future expansion and not solely this is costing too much money, because this is good real estate.
Yeah. I don't know this for sure, but I have always assumed that go-karts probably cost more for insurance because they're operated by a guest.
Yeah.
And you can't really stop someone from doing something stupid.
Right. Well, and it could also cost like a decent amount of money because you're paying for the gasoline in each of those vehicles. Most of these are non-electric, you know. So I'm not surprised to see go-karts go. I say leave those to places like Fun Spot or like, you know, independently operated go-kart locations.
Yeah.
It seems like people are more inclined to go do go-karts at places like that than like a major theme park.
Yeah. And again, it's a preference thing, but I know personally I've never gone to a theme park and been like, I have to do the sky coaster, I have to go karts, and I like both of those things. You know, when there's like all these roller coasters and flat rides, and
they're non-essential.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and speaking of non-essential, Canada's Wonderland has quite the roller coaster collection, and supposedly another attraction that has given its last rides is Time Warp, which is a Zamperla
Darn.
Volare. Yeah. Oh darn. Like. Listen, if you're going to close anything at Canada's Wonderland, that one makes total sense. So again, like most of these attractions that we've seen close, I don't think people are really going to miss. It's really just Kingda Ka.
yeah. And that one hurt a lot.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
We're still not over that one. Another weird closure that we've seen, and this, it's unclear exactly what the future of this one is, but Timberwolf at Worlds of Fun will not be operating in 2025.
Yeah, I feel like if they were gonna close it, like they've been pretty ruthless.
Yeah.
And they would just say, yeah, it's done. Like
Right.
I don't. To me, that means it's getting a retrack.
Yeah, I think Gravity Group pre-cut would make the most sense. We're still unsure, like, you know, down the line if this new company will continue to work with RMC, because both companies have kind of calmed down with like the RMC installations, but both companies love working with Gravity Group and have done so recently. So like I could definitely see that coming to Timberwolf.
But dang it, RMC at that park would be nice.
That would be really cool. Yeah, Worlds of Fun is one of those properties that I imagine is going to be staying in the chain, and I like to think will be growing in the future because Kansas City as a market is just booming.
Oh,
so,
God, yeah.
That's one property that I think we should keep our eye on. Another one that I think we should be watching for the change for the positive is Six Flags Over Georgia. All these Cedar Fair executives have never tapped into the Atlanta market, and that is huge. And I think they specifically cited in an earnings call that like they want to invest in Over Georgia.
That makes sense. I mean, they've already done quite a few things that I wouldn't have really seen the original Six Flags chain doing, which is just kind of like beautifying. You know, they did a nice repaint on Goliath. It's now like a aqua kind of blue.
Yeah,
color.
which I believe there was a quote. I think it was done at like a one of these like no coaster cons or something. I might be getting the wording not 100% here, but it was like something along the lines of someone from Cedar Fair executive was like, "Why haven't you painted your hypercoaster?" And the people from Six Flags were like, "We weren't given the budget to do so." Yeah. And they're like, "Well, what are you waiting for? Here, like, do it." And we're getting theming upgrades for acrophobia, restaurant improvements, food and beverage just across the chain is going to be exponentially better.
Yeah, well, I think they hired like a chef, like a new head chef.
Yeah, which
is
they
big.
didn't have before.
No, exactly. So there are a lot of things that are happening that I personally think are very positive. A lot of the rides that they've gotten rid of are ones that are not good, and if it was up to me, I would have probably made the same decisions. Like,
yeah.
I think a lot of older rides, like, I think the really bad SLCs just need to go. And if they're not going to do, like, the Great Nor'easter treatment on them, just get rid of them. Nobody gets off of them going, that was great, except, like,
right.
Tanner Tucker. But most normal people are like, that was not pleasant.
I imagine that the closures are not done.
No,
they're going
I
to
doubt
continue at least for the next year or so. But again, their goal is to focus on long-term growth. They're calling it Project Accelerate. They're really throwing around this term optimization. So I'm curious how that is going to evolve over time, especially when it comes to which parks stay and which go. I think we're all making our predictions of which could potentially be on the chopping block. I know you've said like several times that you think Six Flags America could be one.
Well,
like
yeah, that land is
very
valuable. It's
very.
outside. It's in the DMV area. I believe it's in PG County, which is a very, affluent county, and
Right.
the land is valuable.
Well,
so.
and Six Flags America, I feel like they struggle with attendance. It's also built up kind of a reputation in that area. A lot of people just choose to go to Hershey or King's Dominion. Anytime you close a park, you can also then send those core assets that can be relocated and repurposed elsewhere to other properties. That was the Geauga Lake effect. So, and you know, we know Cedar Fair has no problem closing parks because of that. They've done it before. So
yeah, but
it wouldn't shock me.
I also think that they're going to be a bit more like selective about that kind of stuff now. So like I don't really see them relocating some of their rides. You know, like I feel like they'd be like, okay, Firebird.
No, that's gonna be gone.
Like they're you know, like in theory, yeah, you could send that to another park, but like people aren't gonna like it.
Right. They're looking at like which attractions have positive effects on the guest experience, and those are the ones that get relocated. Now the other thing is that like just because they might want to dump a park does not mean that it will close permanently. If there is an operator that wants to acquire the park and flip it or do whatever they want with it, then that is entirely possible. We saw that with Indiana Beach and the old Fantasy Island, which is now Niagara Amusement Park. So like it's not out of the question. Like one place in particular that comes to my mind is Darien Lake, because Six Flags reacquired that, and under the merger see them unacquiring it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I'm very curious to see what happens, but I think there's a few parks that I would be a little worried about.
Yeah, and also the like pool of manufacturers that they're going to be willing to work with, I think is going to change a lot. Ironically, a lot of the rides they're getting rid of are like Vekomas, and now like they're kind of choosing new Vekoma as like their one of their anchors. It seems like Mach, Vekoma, Gravity Group are going to be anchors in this chain now. Which,
I agree.
You know,
those are positive things. Yeah, like I'm imagining like, okay, I mean, first of all, if the merger didn't happen, we wouldn't be getting a tilt coaster at Cedar Point. So, I mean, that's something that's extremely positive. And now that you have all these big pieces of land opening up, I think it is not out of the question that you could see more tilt coasters show up in the future. I'm specifically imagining where Nighthawk was. Oh my gosh, that'd be incredible.
Yeah, and I also think we're going to continue seeing a lot of B&Ms still going forward.
Yeah.
Which, you know, for a long time, Six Flags and B&M weren't really working together, and now that's resurged with the merger, which is cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it's going to be a shift, but I think that now the focus is on, like, comfortable risk-taking. Like, you know, if they're going with this Mach for King to Cause replacement, it's like Mach is very tried and true. Like the risk that they took with the Pescetti Bowl, like I don't see them taking risks like that as much anymore. Yeah.
Well, Six Flags they were risk takers. And now under the merger, we wonder like, is there going to be a middle line? I would say like comfortable risk taking, the new attraction coming to Magic Mountain. We know it's like a first of its kind attraction from Vekoma.
But they also are like, okay, Vekomas are
very reliable.
Yeah, they work. Like they do. And
comfortable risk.
If they don't, they're gonna make it work.
Yeah, totally.
And like, you know, especially after a few big missteps, like we just said, the Pescetti Bowl, which didn't work out, the Zamperla Top Thrill 2 thing, like which even if they get it working, it still was catastrophic. Like it did not go well.
Yeah.
So like I feel like they're definitely gonna dial back as a company, be like, all right, if we're gonna do something crazy,
well,
let's make it work.
And the other big change that you're gonna see with new investments is that they are really driving home the story factor. They want everything to be themed and like really, they're focusing on presentation. Georgia, again, coming back to that park, is a great example because they literally took Georgia Surfer, a ride that had not opened yet, and said we are going to retheme it to Georgia Gold Rusher and put actual theming pieces and some sort of story.
Yes.
Yeah, they literally repainted an attraction that hadn't made its debut yet.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm not saying that it's going to be to that extent every single time, but like Wrath of Rakshasa, I imagine we're going to be seeing a similar approach to like what Dr. Diabolical did.
You know, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing because one of my biggest complaints when I went to pretty much any Six Flags park was like, you know, it's just a roller coaster with like a superhero name slapped onto it. A lot of times they choose tacky colors, so
it's a ride on concrete.
Yeah, so I think kind of being like, okay, like we're gonna be more like diligent in our decision making and really focus on like appearances too. Like I think those are all good things.
Let us know down in the comments below. What are your thoughts on the current status of the new Six Flags Entertainment Corporation post merger? And if there are any attractions that you think should replace some that we just recently saw close, and so on and so forth. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time.